So we did a couple polls, kind of bouncing off last week's Batman ones. Alfred kind of won as the best dad. This week we asked, who is the real Alfred?
Who is the real Alfred?
That is the burning question.
Will the real Alfred please stand up?
So we only get 4 options, which was a bit tricky. We had to debate it a bit.
Yeah.
We went with Michael Caine, Jeremy Irons, Michael Gough.
I would say Goff.
Michael Gough, and Sean Pertwee. And overwhelmingly,
Sean Pertwee came last. That's what I want to focus on.
53% of the vote went to Michael Caine. So we have a lot of people who grew up with the Dark Knight trilogy.
I think that's fair enough.
Yeah.
I'm happy with that. My personal vote was Michael Gough.
Was he the one in Michael Keaton?
I think he was definitely Keaton. He may have even trickled over into Kilmer. I'm not entirely sure, but I really like Michael Caine as well. If I'd had the option, potentially would have gone for the sassy little bitch that is the animated series is Alfred Pennyworth.
Like, before Jeremy Irons, I would have said Michael Caine, hands down.
Yeah.
Just definitely Michael Caine is my Alfred. But
You like him a bit more hands-on, don't you?
yeah, and he's so... Jeremy Irons is so acerbic in his role. Like, he's just dissing Bruce Wayne left and right, making these snarky little comments, and I loved it.
The animated one's a bit like that as well. It's a good balance, I think, for him to be like, I've put up with your bullshit for 30 years. I'm done. This is me. Take me as I am. Yeah.
Whereas Michael Caine was a little bit more the subservient butler role.
Yeah, a bit more paternal.
Yeah, a bit more paternal. Although, I mean, if you were raising Bruce Wayne, I can imagine you would end up being a snarky little bitch at some point too.
Absolutely. The amount of people he's had to put in a taxi, send away, the amount of sheets he's had to put in the incinerator.
Yeah. Our second poll was kind of a more fun one. Basically, how nerdy are you? So we had kind of a sliding scale. It's a bit subjective. I like that Iron Guy was an option. That got 11% of the vote. My favorite Batman is fill in the blank. I have a Triforce tramp stamp, or I beat the Kobayashi Maru. And my favorite Batman won at 39% with I beat the Kobayashi Maru coming in at a nice 31%. We also had a few Star Wars and Pokemon suggestions about how nerdy people are, which was interesting.
I mean, if I had to come up with a Pokemon one, it would be that I've bred a Squirtle with 6 perfect IVs. That's my level of nerdiness. I disgust myself, though. Welcome to the Geekly. I'm Jules. I'm joined as always by Lex. Lex, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great. I've got my coffee. I am ready to go.
Ready to go. What have we got on the show today?
Oh, well, we've got our Justice League fan cast, and we've both done some interesting things.
Cannot wait for this.
I'm really curious to see what your picks are.
Oh.
Then we are talking about The Boys Season 1, Krypton 207, Swamp Thing 109, and the premiere episode of Pennyworth.
And it was 1 hour 15 minutes. It was
really?
It was.
I thought when I was watching it, it seemed a little bit long, which is not a good sign, but we'll get to that later in the podcast.
A little bit later, yeah. All right, well, let's start with the fan cast.
With the Justice League fan cast, and we got this suggestion from Takeny for Marvel and DC. Check them out. They do good stuff as well. I did an all-female Justice League. Jules did an all-male Justice League with the idea that they'd be combined together to have a 14-member Justice League with kind of rotating members.
Because, sometimes you just need a day off.
Yeah.
Even the Justice League.
Superheroes need a day off every now and then. Aside from kind of the trinity of Wonder Woman, Batwoman, and Supergirl, I found it kind of difficult to pick. There are a lot of really amazing female Justice League members, and winnowing it down to 4 was quite tricky. So I ended up picking ones that I was most familiar with, just to kind of be on the safe side.
Okay.
How did you pick your guys?
I tried to think of an actual scenario that this league would find themselves in. It's set 15 years after Darkseid has come to Earth, and basically not billions have died, but millions have died. Particularly in America, because that's where all these stories tend to happen. So this is a team 15 years on from that, and during that fight, Superman died. Try to canonize. And Lois Lane also died as part of the collateral damage of this kind of crisis level event. Batman's there. Obviously. Batman, he's kind of middle of his career, watched Superman die, took a big toll on him. He's kind of more like a figurehead now, and more the man in the chair. Back in the Batcave, kind of sending info out to the rest of the team. In the fallout of what happened, this is Lois Lane and Superman when they've had Connor Kent. So Connor Kent was about kind of 15 at the time when both his parents died in this crisis level event. So in these 15 years, Batman has raised Connor Kent, and he has the abilities of Superman.
He does so well with raising children.
He has the abilities of Superman and the mentality of Batman, and he has become a Robin in these 15 years. I mean, can you imagine that for a second? The mentality of Batman and kind of the abilities of Superman.
It's kind of scary, actually.
Yeah.
Kind of imagine that somebody with the abilities of Superman and the mentality of Batman is walking a very fine line between hero and villain.
Yeah. There have probably been some kind of Damian Wayne moments, but Batman's, largely kept him in check. He's got, superhuman strength, superhuman hearing, superhuman durability, enhanced agility and reflexes, invulnerability, decelerated aging, tactile telekinesis, and telepathy. That's just straight from Wikipedia. So that guy, but trained the way Bruce has been trained over the years from the League of Assassins. Knowing every kind of hand-to-hand combat ability, having gadgets, having all the money for all the tech, and that is what he is. So those are my two first people in my team. I went for Liam Hemsworth as Connor Kent. I went again for John Hamm as Batman because we've talked about the fact that he could be a really good Bruce Wayne.
Well, the first member of my team is Wonder Woman. It was kind of tricky because I really like Gal Gadot's version of it, and we've kind of made it an unofficial rule that we don't cast people who have already played the roles. So I went with Morena Baccarin from Firefly and Gotham and Deadpool, and because she's the closest I could get to Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman.
I
really like her.
Yeah, she's amazing.
I think she could definitely do the Wonder Woman thing. And then for Batwoman, I went with Maggie Q. Most of what I've seen her in has been kind of like detective roles. She was also in the Divergent series, so she's quite a good action-oriented actor as well as, a dramatic actress, which I think Batwoman kind of needs. And she's got that sort of super serious look on her face that, I just sort of imagine Batwoman as being kind of stoic and hard and tough as shit. And,
well, yeah, I think the Bat fam, they're not really smiles and rainbows.
No, they aren't. They're not a very cheery group.
I went for the Flash because I think having a speedster is quite important. I went with Sean William Scott. He's going to be like the wise-cracking one. He's not going to be as awkward as Ezra Miller's Flash or as kind of out and out nice as maybe Grant Gustin's Flash was in the early season. He's going to be on the verge of being too cocky. So he's going to be kind of the comic element in the team. He levels it out, with the Bat fam being quite serious. He's going to be on the other end of that, just leveling it out.
Well, I went with the speedster as well. I picked Jesse Quick.
Nice.
And I took a Flash alumnus, Kimberly Williams Paisley, who played Renee Adler on The Flash.
Oh, yes, I remember. Sherlock's girlfriend, yeah.
Yeah, she kind of had the look of a speedster. I don't know what that means, but when I looked at her, I was like, yeah, she could be a speedster.
Was her hair kind of always up and crazy.
I enjoyed her performance. She also obviously has some versatility because she played several Renee Adlers in The Flash. And I just thought she'd be a good Jessie.
Green Arrow. We've talked about how pointless it is having archers in the team, but I think just over the recent years, Green Arrow has kind of gone up in my estimations. I've gone with someone who knows how to use bow and arrow. I've gone with Orlando Bloom. Legolas, obviously, it was all a wig. It wasn't his real blonde hair, but I think he looks good blonde. I think comics accurate Green Arrow is blonde. He's partial to facial hair, Pirates of the Caribbean, knows how to use bow and arrow. Lord of the Rings trilogy. I think he's got the makings of another good cinematic archer.
I could see that. I did not get anybody from the Green Arrow world. I forgot Supergirl. So my next one is going to be Supergirl. And I picked Naomi Harris, who kind of is probably most famous for playing Moneypenny
I thought,
in Skyfall. Yeah. And she's going to be in the next one as Moneypenny as well, which is obviously kind of a departure from the traditional, blonde hair, blue-eyed Supergirl, but I like her.
The best moment of her being Moneypenny is the opening scene to, I can't remember if I think it might be Skyfall, when she shoots James Bond and he falls off the train 100 feet down to a river and he's presumed dead. Yeah. That is one of the great Bond openings, in my opinion. When M's like, take the shot. Yeah, I think that's a really good choice. I like it. I feel really bad because you just talked about how we wouldn't cast someone that's already played the role, because I've gone with John Constantine and Matt Ryan. So I've gone with John.
To be fair,
I mean,
he kind of is Constantine.
when I saw that Shazam film we watched a few weeks ago, and I found out that Superman's invulnerable, he has like a slight vulnerability to magic, I decided that I wanted Superboy, Connor Kent, to be trained in being resistant to magic. So I immediately knew I wanted Constantine in the team. And I am Nard for many days, thinking about who would be great. And I've come back with Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan's played him in animated films, and he's played him in live action TV. So if they don't care that he's the best Constantine ever, then yeah, let's complete the trinity: TV, animation, and the film. So he's going to be working with Connor Kent to kind of remove this vulnerability that Kryptonians potentially have to magic. So that was my next casting.
Yeah, like I actually really wanted to put John Constantine on my team, and I was like, damn it!
Yeah.
Why am I doing an all-female one?
I mean, a gender swap John Constantine would be very interesting as an actual human
true.
being. Yeah.
You're like, we would have had two John Constantines.
They would have fallen in love.
Yeah,
They
would have been like the perfect couple.
Yeah.
Okay, my next one is Mira. I figured, you know,
Oh, yeah.
you have.
And can I just say, I don't have Aquaman on my team, so I think that's
How
a great.
could you?
Oh well, I mean, so I think Mira is a great bit of casting.
And for Mira, I went with Tatiana Ali from The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Yeah,
I mean, most notably from The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. She's done loads of other stuff. But
a lot of music stuff.
Yeah, she has. And again, like, she has great energy. I think she could really kind of bring the role alive, and she's been kind of one of my favorite actresses since I was a kid watching Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. So basically what I do with this, I think I go around and I'm like, oh, I really like that person. I'm going to match them up with this superhero that I really like. So yeah, I think nothing about story or anything like that. It's just mix and match.
I got a Green Lantern in my team. I went with the Jon Stewart Green Lantern, and I went with David Oyelowo. I think that's how you pronounce his name. He just looks like he would be really good in a superhero film. He's quite physically fit. When I've heard Jon Stewart speak in the cartoon, he's quite a not stoic individual, but he's not high energy. And I think David would do a really good job. I won't say his surname again because I can barely pronounce it. I think he's expressed a desire to be in a superhero film at one point as well. Yeah, I think he'd be a good member of the team.
So my number 6 person was Miss Martian. How can you have a Justice League without Martian Manhunter? So Miss Martian has to be in there.
Absolutely.
I went with Summer Glau from Firefly and Serenity.
Been in the Arrowverse as well.
Yeah, she has.
Really good.
She's just, she's a dynamite actor. She's got that sort of otherworldly vibe to her, which I think would really suit Miss Martian.
She looks like she could beat the hell out of most people as well.
She does, yeah. Which is funny because she's quite a small person, but she's just got that look of like, I will rip your head off.
I've got Martian Manhunter.
Okay.
So fantastic. I went with Keegan-Michael Key. This is probably going to be a slightly different take on these are two stoic characters back to back. I wanted somebody very tall because I think Martian Manhunter's quite tall. I wanted somebody who's known for being serious and funny, so he's got that balance. I just think he looks, again, like he's someone that could do quite well in a fight. But he plays the fool a bit in, like, Key and Peele. I just saw him and I thought he'd be good in the role.
Yeah, I mean, there have been some really great successes of bringing comedic actors into dramatic roles, so, I mean...
Yeah, so that is my team.
I have one more. My last one is Vixen. For her, I went with Jennifer Freeman, who's probably most well known for the TV show My Wife and Kids. She's actually done a lot of TV work.
Who was she in My Wife and Kids? Claire. Yeah, so I used to watch that show all the time. She was great.
She's my Vixen. For a brief moment, I had Kerry Washington, and then I was just like, nah. I mean, I really like Kerry Washington. I think she's very versatile in a lot of ways, but I kind of wanted to go maybe slightly less serious. So yeah, that's my lineup.
Cool. Those are our teams.
We'll post these on Twitter and our website, and you can tell us what you think, completely unfiltered as always.
So the Watchmen trailer was dropped at Comic-Con. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, I just watched it. The thing that I was thinking as I was watching it is, are we reaching superhero oversaturation? Because in itself, there's nothing really bad about the trailer, nothing that I could say, like, oh, they should have done this differently, they should have done that, I wish this would happen. But at the same time, it felt very much like a lot of things we've seen before, particularly with, Umbrella Academy and Doom Patrol and The Boys coming out. This kind of idea of... We're starting to move away from the kind of idealistic superhero who always does good and getting into the more kind of superheroes as real people narratives. And I wanted Watchmen to have more of a punch than this show seems to have in it.
I watched it and I just don't really know what it's going to be about. I think the key line was, can you tell the difference between a masked vigilante vigilante and a police officer, and nobody could. And I think that's the whole point. It's going to be about secret identity and how it's going to work both ways. Good people are going to have it, and the villains are going to have it, and the police are going to have it. So everybody's going to be running around in masks, and it'll be very easy for one person to just bounce around from one group to another. I really loved the Watchmen film. I know a lot of people didn't really like it. I like the graphic novel. I don't know why we need this. It seems like it's kind of stepped down. Obviously, it's a TV show. It's not like a second film where they're going to have Hollywood A-listers and budgets, but it just feels like there's something kind of missing. Some kind of X factor is missing from the show. It seems like it's going to be a kind of police procedural with masks. And I just think, like you said, are we at the point where there is an oversaturation? Because you can't just say, hey, let's do Holby City, but they're superheroes. Hey, let's do Downton Abbey, but they're superheroes. Let's do a police procedural, but they're superheroes.
A lot of the superhero shows are very similar to police procedurals. When you think about like the Arrowverse,
Yeah.
it's all about solving crime. I mean, Barry Allen is
CSI.
CSI. So you don't get much further from, or much closer to crime procedural than that. Yeah, I mean, like you, I really loved the film. It was dark, it was gritty, it was, you know, everything I kind of wanted the Watchmen film to be. And this, just from the trailer, the TV show seems like it's going to be a very diluted version of that, which I think is potentially a mistake. Like, with the Watchmen, you need to embrace the brutality and the darkness and just go for it. Kind of similarly to how The Boys went for it in their first season.
Watchmen, it kind of makes me think dystopia, even though it's not exactly a dystopia. You know, there are worse dystopias. But it makes me think...
I don't know, because you do have that idea of a very controlled state. So, yeah, I would classify it as a dystopia.
It's like a kind of bizarro version of our world where points in history, different things happened that could have led us to that same point. And that's what it makes me feel, the film, the graphic novel. This just makes me feel like some guys were just kind of fans of the show and thought, hey, do you know what's doing well at the moment? Superheroes. Let's just squeeze this out a little bit more. Let's get a little bit more juice out of that graphic novel.
I feel like it's very divorced from the graphic novel and the film. Kind of like Lucifer, which is the show is basically just a crime procedural with Lucifer. It definitely follows the tropes of the genre quite a bit, and there isn't a lot of the interesting dynamics that make the character interesting. And so it's kind of like they're just taking a very successful brand and slapping it onto some other product, hoping that we won't notice that they aren't the same thing.
Yeah. Watchmen, again, I think of Watchmen, I think of dark, I think of gritty, I think of nighttime, I think of almost like a noirish tale, like a detective story. So much of this happened in the day.
Well, if you think about like the film, almost all of that happened at night. There may have been one or two daytime scenes, but mostly it was a very aesthetically dark film, or like lighting wise. Yeah, this just felt like any other TV show that's out there at the moment. Just you know, with some superheroes. In
the films, like, there is no signs of superhero fatigue, but maybe on TV, because it's it's weekly episodic, unless you're doing The Boys in one go, we're probably there at TV. You know,
I mean, there are a lot of TV shows, and most of them do tend to take the crime procedural route, which is a very natural thing for superheroes to do, because they are crime fighters. I don't know if it's necessarily a case of fatigue in itself so much as the bar keeps being raised. So it's not enough to just throw out a crime procedural with superheroes. You have to kind of go above and beyond and really think about how your show is going to be different than, you know, the plethora of other superhero shows that are out there for us to watch. At this stage, in terms of TV shows, we have so many options, so many different varieties of superheroes to kind of follow. And as I mentioned, we're starting to get quite a lot of... I mean, I think most of the recent ones that have come out have been this kind of dysfunctional superhero thing. You know,
that's the new vogue, isn't it? We've gone from the idealistic, we've moved on to some kind of darker take on them.
You know, Doom Patrol, The Boys. That's where it's going. And I think if Watchmen had come out at the beginning of that trend, we would be having a very different reaction to the trailer than we are now, after, you know, we've just kind of been inundated with 4 shows of these dysfunctional superheroes, and we're getting another one. So what's different about Watchmen?
Yeah, I mean, one of my favourite graphic novel characters, probably Rorschach. just a great idea, great storyline. This showed me a room of Rorschachs, and I feel nothing. I mean, it's just I feel like he was so unique and so great, and now you're giving me like 30 of him. Just that's a kind of good metaphor for the whole show.
Yeah.
It's just diluting it down and just. Anyway,
I mean, we'll give it a shot and we'll let you know what we think. We may not review the whole season. It depends on how it goes.
Okay, let's start by talking about this week's episode of Krypton.
I found it to be kind of another sort of weak episode. There was, again, a lot of standing around discussing things. I think Krypton works best when there's at least some action in it. The kind of big reveal that Corvex was actually Jor-El was not such a big reveal. I mean, I was pretty much expecting it from the moment he appeared, so that kind of fell a little bit short. I don't know, what were your thoughts on it?
I would agree with you. I think this show has done action quite well. I think it needs action in every episode. It was another episode where people were kind of standing around discussing things. Adam and Kem were talking a lot about how Kem had suddenly become the leader of a particular group of the Resistance, which was a little bit unbelievable. You know, he's quite a bumbling guy working in a bar, and now he's
he worked
leader.
with the Sagittari for a few months, and all of a sudden he's like this military genius, and that's...
So lots of these conversations and not much action. The bit in the episode I enjoyed the most, and again I use that kind of advisedly, there wasn't really a lot that was good here. We find out that Doomsday was a citizen of Krypton who was turned into Doomsday in order to fight a war, and they ended up winning the war anyway, even before he'd had his full evolution into something that was supposedly invulnerable, so he can be killed. I was looking forward to the Zod versus Doomsday battle at the beginning, and it lasted all of 10 seconds, which was very sad. Zod just brought him down with 3 shots from this weird ice cannon thing.
Because I found the Doomsday back history kind of unnecessary.
Yeah.
It wasn't even really that interesting. It was kind of a very typical story about zealous scientists willing to like make any sacrifice to come up with the perfect super soldier weapon. I don't know, I'm kind of done with villains being humanized. You know, we've gotten to a stage in media where even zombies are being humanized and turned into protagonists, and it's kind of like, where the fuck are the monsters? Not everybody has to be a sympathetic character. Not everybody has to have some redeeming quality, particularly your villains. Your villains can just be bad, particularly with something like Doomsday. Like, I don't need to know that like he sacrificed himself to save his people, and you know, he left behind a wife and children and stuff like that. What does that have to do with what's going to happen now? I mean, presumably Zod's going to use the information to like mind control him and turn him into a weapon for Zod's use. Yeah, I just wasn't that into it.
So in a show that's largely unnecessary, we had a storyline that was unnecessary.
As I was watching this, I just remembered the end of last season, we saw Superman's cape with the Zod emblem on it, and they have essentially completely forgotten that.
When he pulled open the shirt and you saw the L emblem, kind of like a little Superman gesture, I thought, yeah, where's the cape? Yeah. Why has that been dropped? Because that was quite interesting.
They just totally forgot about that. And I don't even think the storyline at this point in time is leaning towards Jor-El becoming a Zod. So I hate it when shows do that. They drop this like really sort of teaser thing in, and then they just like completely forget it. And it's like, well, you're just taunting us really for the sake of keeping us on the hook.
Do you have any interest in continuing to watch Krypton?
Yeah, I mean, it's alright. I don't know if there's much point in us continuing to review it.
I guess that's kind of what I meant.
Yeah.
Watching it for the show.
Yeah, I think we're just saying the same things about it. There have been a few redeeming episodes, but overall it's been a very tepid season. There hasn't been a lot of interesting things happening. A lot of plot holes, a lot of just fumbled moments where they could have had something really interesting. You know, like the fight between Zod and Doomsday. I mean, Zod did win that incredibly quick, and there was kind of like an oh shit moment when he fired the second shot and Doomsday was still coming at him, but then, you know, third shot, that's it. Yeah, I would say it's probably time for us to call it on Krypton.
Speaking of shows that nobody asked for, we did not need, and it's a real sign of the times that they are just doing everything they can to cash in on the superhero genre. Let's talk about Pennyworth, a show set in England in the 60s. Alfred Pennyworth's the main character, him meeting Thomas Wayne and wanting to start up a security company. What are your thoughts?
I feel like this show could be any... I mean, it's like a cheap version of James Bond, or like James Bond distilled into a television show, more than it's something related to the Bat Fam. It's probably about as divorced from the Batman universe as it can possibly be and still contain characters from the Batman universe.
Would you in that sense put it on a par with Krypton?
I would actually say that Krypton has slightly more relevance in the superhero world than Pennyworth does. Like, legitimately, there's nothing that ties this show to Gotham or Batman or anything kind of superhero-ish. It's basically just this kind of former SAS guy dealing with kind of a terrorist-ish situation. He gets tied up in this conflict with Thomas Wayne, and his girlfriend gets kidnapped right after she dumps him. She's fairly lucky that he's a decent guy and goes after her. Anyway, it could be any show. There's nothing that really sort of sticks out and says, like, oh, it belongs in this genre. Well, I mean, yeah, okay, it definitely belongs in kind of the spy thriller crime procedural sort of genre, but there's nothing that jumps out about it that's comic booky or superhero-y. There isn't even a mention of superheroes or anything like that. I found it kind of bland, and it's not really my line of interest.
Did we need this show?
Absolutely not.
It's the equivalent of having a show about Jarvis, I think, back in the early days, working with Howard Stark. We got an Agent Carter show, and Jarvis was, like, added on to that. He was, like, a little bit of seasoning on top of it to bring the show up. I agree with you. I don't think we need this show, and it's made by the people who made Gotham, a couple of them. I just don't think we need this show, and I think it's an I think you used the word when we were talking about this off recording, an oversaturation of kind of the superhero genre. As a TV show, I enjoyed it. I thought it was very much like I think I said Peaky Blinders already. It's like it's a show set in London in the 60s. He is believably tough, in my opinion. He's believably smart. He's going up against a group called the Raven Society, which sounds very much like the Court of Owls in what they do. They're involved in lots of things throughout London. That ticks a lot of boxes for me. I will continue to watch this probably by myself, but I wouldn't want to keep reviewing it for the show. I think a lot of people maybe, who like that kind of Britishness, who like the kind of James Bond kind of thing, might take something from this. But I think a lot of our fan base will rightly kind of maybe turn their noses up at this and think, what's the next thing going to be about, you know? The Penguins, well, I was going to say the Penguins' mum. We do know about the Penguins' mum.
We do know about the Penguins' mum. We got quite a lot of that in Gotham. I mean, Gotham was mostly about the Penguins' mum.
Yeah, like the lineage of the Court of Owls, you know, how they came into being, or Wonder Woman's great, whatever, you know, just...
I mean, I think there's an opening for stories like that, kind of in sort of a Twilight Zone thing, or similar to Marvel's What If TV series coming out. Just these sort of one-shot stories that give us a little bit more insight into the background of some of these characters that we don't see in the spotlight so much. You know, like the first meeting between Thomas Wayne and Alfred Pennyworth is interesting, but do we need a whole series about that? I don't think we do. It would have been much better served if DC had done kind of a What If style show. We have a story about Alfred and Thomas Wayne. We have a story about, I was going to say Howard Stark, but that's not the right publishing house. You know, just some little snippets here and there to give us some more insight onto the background characters that we don't get to see very much.
I think you hit the nail on the head with the one-shot idea. I think it's exactly the right route to take. I'm very intrigued by the What If series that Marvel is going to be doing. And yeah, I think there is scope for other stories, but just not a whole season of them, like you just said. I really like the intro, him kind of running around. It felt very James Bond. I like the look of it. I like the sound of it. I like that there were airships over London, which is the way I always see Gotham in my mind's eye. Maybe we'll be proved wrong, but I doubt it. This is going to be very dry, very, very British, obviously. And I almost feel like they'd do better moving it away from Batman trappings. Maybe try and find a new audience who maybe might find Batman through Pennyworth. But I wouldn't pursue Batman fans for this, because I think a lot of them in the current climate with things like Gotham. I mean, Gotham's like a caricature. This feels like a period drama in certain respects. They feel poles apart. So this might be the kind of thing a new audience discovers, but I would not suggest we continue to review it on the show.
I say we'll probably give it one more week. You know, sometimes the premiere episode is a little rocky and maybe it finds its feet in the second episode. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend it to Batman fans. I would recommend it to James Bond fans, maybe fans of British drama. I keep thinking about Life on Mars.
Life on Mars, yeah.
Yeah.
I love that show.
I do too, actually.
We should watch that show. I haven't seen it in years. I never watched Ashes to Ashes. Did you?
Yeah, I did watch Ashes to Ashes.
I need to watch Ashes to Ashes.
I don't know if it's the like 80s thing that I don't like as much, or the fact that it's a spinoff. I don't know. It didn't quite click with me as much as Life on Mars.
Yeah, this is being made by a TV channel called Stars, which I don't think I've heard of. I honestly think it's
they're kind of lower budget cinema.
Yeah. I got this is going to sound crazy, but I think if this was kind of like a Sunday night BBC One thing, I think it would find its audience. I really do.
Definitely.
But
actually, I could see a whole gamut of people who were never interested in comics suddenly knowing who Alfred Pennyworth is and everything about his life, and being really confused when they come up against Batman fans who are like, what do you mean you don't know who Bruce Wayne is?
There was a lot to like, but it's just not a kind of...
It's not geeky.
You know when they were making the Powerpuff Girls, there was it like Chemical X or something was put in? Sugar, spice and everything nice, and Chemical X. There needs to be like a chemical for geekiness that we have to think of, like Chemical G. This doesn't have Chemical G, or the G factor, the geek factor. There is an audience for this, but it's not...
It's not your traditional Batman audience.
Yeah.
And I think probably your more traditional Batman fans will be a little bit disappointed by it if they go into it thinking it's going to be more of the Batman world, or more of kind of like similar to Gotham. Gotham was meant to be more about Jim Gordon than Bruce Wayne, even though it didn't end up going that way. So if you're thinking that Pennyworth is going to be a sort of similar thing, kind of tokenly focused on Pennyworth with a lot of Wayne business thrown into it, because Thomas Wayne isn't even married at this point, you're going to be disappointed.
I think episode 2 is called Martha Kane, and I just wonder if that's going to be the big meeting. Yeah, because I love James Bond, so that's my kind of pathway into this. Do you think there might be time jumps in this? And do you think that one day this guy will kind of become Sean Pertwee? Do you think that, because obviously they're made by the same people, and like the final episode of Gotham, like, was him putting on the cowl? Do you think the final episode of this is going to be like him putting on the butler's uniform? Alfred Begins.
Yeah, I mean, well, they've already sort of dropped the hints of that, because his dad is apparently a butler, and his
dad, what an absolute...
He's such an ass. And his dad is basically like, you know what you need to do with your life? You need to go be a butler. And then you have purpose. And Alfred is, of course, like, I don't think so. I'm curious to see, like, what leads Alfred into eventually becoming a butler, if the idea is that he's actually part of Thomas Wayne's security team,
that's what I'm hoping,
but, like, disguised as a butler. There's interesting stuff. I wouldn't write this show off. It's just not particularly geeky. Yeah. That's it. So another new show that I'm not entirely convinced is necessary is The Boys. Well, I have a question. What does The Boys offer us that our other dysfunctional superhero shows do not? Does it bring anything new to the table?
I felt it did. I felt this was like a better Watchmen adaptation than the recent Watchmen trailer we just saw. I kind of had mixed thoughts on this. 50% I enjoyed, 50% I disliked. I disliked The Boys, the little team up. Very bland, very boring, brought nothing new. But I liked seeing a bizarro Justice League where they've just... the Justice League, it's impossible to believe that their power hasn't corrupted them at some point. You know, they maintain this truth, justice, and the American way kind of mentality throughout all of it. Never mind who they go up against. I liked seeing a team of superheroes that were just absolutely contemptible. I wanted the boys to one by one kill all the seven, basically. That's what I wanted to see, because these people were just irredeemable, absolutely hateful. More interested in how they're doing on Instagram. They've got PR teams, they've got HR teams. I enjoyed it, and I think this is the closest thing to a Justice League TV show we've had, or we're going to have for a while. The moment when Homelander and Queen Maeve, is that her name?
Yeah.
The moment when Homelander and Queen Maeve were on that plane, they didn't save anybody, but that felt straight out of like a comic book. That felt like, can you imagine if Superman and Wonder Woman were there? It felt like something we haven't really seen on TV before. A-list superheroes within their world actually doing stuff. And then the next scene, it would be Huey with Simon Pegg bitching about pizza rolls or something, and that would bring the whole thing down. But there was enough here to pique my interest for a second series, and I did feel it was fresh. This to me was fresh.
I'm not entirely sure how I feel about The Boys. One, I think none of the characters really stuck out as someone I would be invested in, either good or bad. As you said, the boys were fairly bland. I think overall the general storyline of they gave us for this season was very bland and kind of almost just a series of vignettes. We basically, every episode, just saw how horrible these superheroes actually are, you know? We have the Deep, who rapes Starlight and then continues to try to save imprisoned sea creatures and kills every single one. I enjoyed the fact that they just wander around in their costumes, like, all the time, you know, when Deep is going grocery shopping in his costume, and we never saw them. Well, we saw Starlight out of costume here and there, but the other ones, they were just always in costume. Some of the humor was good, but yeah, I think the story really fell short for me, and it seemed mostly just an emphasis on the idea that power corrupts and these superheroes are really just not very nice people. It wasn't overly interesting to me. I don't know that I really care about a second season because I don't really care about any of these characters. It's weird because everything is here for me to like the show, but I'm not liking it, and I couldn't understand why. And I read a bunch of reviews, and like everybody is like praising the shit out of this show, and I'm just like, what am I missing? I have no idea, but it has the potential to be something really awesome, but they just, I mean, they did make a lot of really bold choices between the Starlight rape scene and then when the Deep gets kind of Gil raped. There are definitely a lot of what the fuck moments, but I feel like they kind of relied on those too heavily rather than having an actual meaty story for the audience to sink their teeth into. They kind of went more for shock value rather than substance, and maybe that's why I feel a really big disconnect with the show. I don't know.
My issue was that I was only really interested in one character on either side for the whole thing, and that was, is it Billy Butcher?
Yeah.
The fact that in the beginning we are told that Homelander raped his wife, presumably killed his wife, and no charges were ever brought. So I was kind of like, I really want to see him lead a team to bring these terrible people down. I'd watch that. You know, Mother's Milk, bland. Frenchie, bland. The girl they rescue, she's got some kind of powers, but bland. Huey, like the whitest guy you'll ever see on television. Super bland. But there was something about Billy's story, Billy Butcher, but he's called Butcher in it, yeah. There was something about Butcher's story that I thought, yeah, okay, this guy's got this vendetta. But see, Huey now has brought in with this vendetta.
It's a story that we've heard over and over and over and over again. You have this guy whose wife or girlfriend gets killed or abducted or whatever, and so then he's on a mission. I mean, Punisher? Anyone?
Yeah, but Punisher's the superhero.
Yeah.
But Butcher's like a guy going up against superheroes.
It's the same story, like, that we have over and over and over again. The least they could have done is come up with something interesting. And granted, at the end, there is an interesting twist to it. But you still have 7 episodes of a fairly bland, overused, trite storyline. And they could have done something way more interesting there.
To see, I mean, I accept that that's been done, but to see the human going up against the superhero, for me, I thought that was different enough.
But see, even Punisher, he's not a superhero.
Well, I mean, he's portrayed as like this superhero kind of guy.
But he
going
doesn't
up
have
against,
superpower.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair point, but I think seeing a human go up against superheroes, as I'm saying, that's interesting to me.
I mean, yeah, it is an interesting concept, but the story they used to justify it was just weak as shit.
Well, that's what I'm saying. In the beginning, that was the story that was being portrayed, but the reason that became troubling was at the very end you find out that his whole mission statement is built on a lie. So Billy's lying there on the grass while Homelander goes up to the kid saying, "Hey, I'm your dad," and then presumably he's going to try and get back at Billy by creating some kind of family. Up until that point, I was very interested in the story. I was very up for seeing Homelander's head like literally being taken off his body, Billy bringing all the 7 down, but now I don't really know what to make of it. Presumably season 2 Billy's going to go into this kind of, he will be struggling to find a sense of self, as in how to move forward. I was compelled up to that point.
See, I had the reverse reaction. I was not at all interested in his story. I was interested in the character. I think Karl Urban does it very well. His backstory, again, is the most stereotypical. Usually, yes, it is the superhero who has this backstory. But in this case, Butcher is kind of the hero because the superheroes are not very good people. So again, you have a hero whose wife has been killed, and it sets him on a mission of vengeance and justice. And the only interesting thing about the story was that she turned out to be alive and has a kid with Homelander and let him believe that she was dead for like X number of years. But to take 8 episodes to get to that point, it's bad storytelling.
Yeah. Did you not at any point think this is a terrible bunch of people? I kind of want to see them all being killed. We see Translucent die in like the first episode, or maybe the second episode. Did you not want that to kind of continue? Because originally that's what I thought the plan would be.
I mean, maybe that's what I felt was missing from the show, because again, you know, we talk about Krypton, you have a lot of scenes where people are just standing around talking, and the boys really didn't do a whole lot to like go up against the Seven. They just kind of sat around and talked about stuff, and there was the joke about Mother's Milk's girlfriend calling all the time, and the little relationship between Huey and Starlight. But for a large part, it was all rhetoric. It was just, you know, yeah, these are the Seven are bad, and we have to, you know, go up against them and try to blackmail them or whatever. But they didn't actually do anything. Maybe if, you know, Butcher had led them against the Seven more than just one, because I mean they only really dealt with Translucent, and to be fair, I mean they stuck a bomb up his ass. He didn't stand much of a chance against them. So yeah, maybe if they'd done a bit more of that kind of vengeance seeking, I would have been more interested in what was going on. But I wasn't that invested in any of the characters on either side of the aisle.
I would have preferred a show where it was maybe Butcher by himself, because like I said, all of his crew were kind of it was weird, like Haley Joel Osment was in it as well.
Yeah.
All of those people were just incredibly bland, and I just wanted to see him go on this mission. I wanted to see him, Punisher style, take down superheroes, and then at the end you just find out it's all built on a lie. So the bedrock upon which the show is built kind of fell away then.
I think the ending could have been more impactful if we had seen him go up against the Seven and kind of, you know, take down Translucent and maybe a couple of others and basically murder people, and then realize that his whole quest was basically for nothing, and he made all of these sacrifices for nothing. Yeah, it could have had more of an impact if he'd actually done some stuff during the season instead of just kind of moped around and been like, Homelander killed my wife, oh my god, my life sucks. I'm so depressed and emo.
What did you make of the character The Deep? Because for me, obviously, he did something absolutely heinous, and it was the first or the second episode, and so he was portrayed as a bit of a monster. And every episode after that, he was turned into he was turned into like Aquaman between the 1950s and basically before Jason Momoa was attached to him. They constantly made these jokes about him talking to fish. He rescued this dolphin, he ended up killing it. Rescued a lobster, he ended up killing it. He was completely played for laughs throughout the whole thing, which was kind of strange because in the beginning they're all portrayed as terrible, but he was portrayed as the worst because of his rape of Starlight.
Yeah, I mean, that was like episode 1, kind of one of the early scenes. Basically the first time we meet the Deep, he raped Starlight.
Yeah.
And then every episode after that, he's turned into a joke. They didn't really address the impact of that. We had kind of no follow-up with Starlight about the effect that the rape and then the publicizing of the rape had on her. She didn't discuss it with anybody. Again, it felt like something they just did for shock value. Like, oh, this will be like really shocking and people are gonna go, what the fuck? But they didn't have any substance behind it. And I think to turn the Deep into basically a joke afterwards is kind of nullifying what he did.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because you stop thinking of him as a horrible person because he's just a joke. And then when it gets to the point of the Gills scene, you kind of almost feel sorry for him, but at the same time you're just thinking, well, he kind of deserves it. Like, he really does deserve it, but they've defanged him, basically. The first episode really grabbed me. I thought it was going to be like this really sort of cutting-edge, challenging TV show that dealt with kind of really heavy issues and didn't shy away from anything, and it didn't live up to its promise for me.
I've never said this about like a graphic novel turned into a TV show or a film that we've watched outside of DC and Marvel. It makes me want to read the graphic novel.
I do want to read the graphic novel.
Which is apparently a lot more graphic. Considerably more graphic. They had to tone it down, would you believe? This is a world I'm kind of feel slightly invested in now, and they're already filming series 2. I just hope that Billy Butcher now doesn't kind of become friends with Homelander and they don't try and change Homelander into being like a good guy. I want them to just double down and kill them all, you know? I want them to wipe this team off the face of the earth. It makes me wonder what, you know, this is like a Bizarro Justice League. It makes me wonder if they've got like a rogues gallery of villains or like a Legion of Doom.
I'm really curious about who the Seven's villains actually are, and whether they are really villains or if they've just been portrayed that way, or if it's just a PR stunt, because, you know, Vought they have like hundreds of superheroes on their payroll. I could totally see them like having casting calls and being like, okay, you're actually more of a villain than a hero, so you're gonna be Homelander's nemesis, and you're gonna have to do this, and here's your crime itinerary, and like off you go. Make sure to like pose for the cameras. I think that would have been an interesting element to bring into it, because when you have people as horrible as the Seven, like, who are their villains?
Yeah, and we haven't really talked about the storyline of this season. It was the idea that Compound V. Yeah, it was the idea that Compound, like, superheroes aren't born. We're told for like 99% of this, they are created by Compound V. But to try and get superheroes in the military, Vought have been sending Compound V to the terrorists to turn some terrorists into like superhero terrorists, so that Washington will say, right, if they've got superheroes on the enemy side, we need superheroes on our side. So it's a whole. It's all about making money. The whole thing is about Vought having this team of superheroes that they can market, monetize, and get them in the military, and that'll be where the real money is. So that's kind of the B story throughout the season. But yeah, God, I wanted them to kill Homelander so much. I wanted Billy Butcher at the end to literally like holding his head somehow and just say like, I got you, you smug bastard. But like I said, we had the rug pull, and he may not even be, well, he's a bad guy, but he may not be quite the bad guy we thought he was. So
I don't know. I mean, he did down a plane of people just because he was pissed off at somebody. Yeah. Like,
and that was such a fucking good scene.
It was.
That was great television.
I would have liked some more fight scenes.
Yeah. I would have liked some more superheroes actually having superhero level enemies to take down, or like superhero level issues to solve. But yeah, then we'd go back to Simon Pegg talking about pizza rolls with Huey.
I was really surprised to see Simon Pegg in that role. Like, I was just like, wow, like, how far down have you come?
Do you know what? In about 2003, I can't remember when Shaun of the Dead came out, but Simon Pegg was my absolute idol. I'd seen Space, I'd seen Shaun of the Dead. I have this signed, really nice picture to me from Simon Pegg. He was like my guy. And I realised when I was watching this, I haven't liked him in anything I've seen him in since Hot Fuzz or A Fantastic Fear of Everything. I can't remember which they came out in. He's a comic relief in the Mission Impossible series. He's the comic relief in the Star Trek series. I've seen him other bits. I've hated him all of it. And I was just, used to be my guy. And just, I look at you now and I just feel sick in my throat. So, yeah. You're going to give this probably what would you give this? Like a...
Say like a 5 out of 10.
Yeah. So I would probably give this a 7. It's built a world that I think it will make big strides next season. But I'm worried about the existential crisis that Billy's going to have now. And I hope they don't tell like 3 episodes, basically, him deciding who he is and what he's going to do with his life now. Because we're told that, his whole mission is a lie. Give the focus more towards the superheroes, as bad as they are. I don't want to hear about Huey's bitching. I don't want to hear about Mother's Milk on the phone with his wife that says he never wants to see her ever again. Or Frenchie. It's so boring. I would still give this a 7, and yeah, I'm interested to see what comes next.
See, I would agree with some of those points. The world is interesting. The characters are interesting. Where this season really fell down was the story. There is no story. It was an 8-episode prologue, and hopefully there will be more story in season 2, but to have an entire season that is basically just setting up the world and introducing you to the characters, it's kind of like, I know I've said it before, but like, it's 8 hours of my life. Why did I need to sit through 8 hours of prologue when they could have filled in these bits with, flashbacks or whatever? Or, other shows do it quite well. I guess the biggest takeaway is know where to start your story, and they started the story entirely in the wrong place.
It's a shame that the main character is Huey rather than maybe Starlight.
Yeah.
Obviously that's not the graphic novel, so we're always grounded in reality rather than being grounded in the 7.
Yeah, because we did follow Starlight for quite a bit, but she was also very removed from the 7.
Yeah.
So, she was essentially only one of the 7 in name only. So yeah, we didn't get a lot of the inner machinations of the 7, which I think would have been interesting. We got a bit of like the relationship between Maeve and Homelander and the kind of back and forth. Maeve is kind of an interesting character because she doesn't seem as bad as the others for some reason.
I think sometimes the people that see the things happening don't intervene, are almost not worse, but they
are kind of worse.
Guilty by lack of.
They're just as culpable.
Yeah.
Like that plane. Like, couldn't Homelander have?
Does she fly?
I don't think she flies. I don't think he flies.
Yeah, that's right.
And he seems like a Superman character.
Yeah.
So like he has basically all of Superman's powers and the whole red, white, and blue thing. So couldn't he have like lifted up the plane?
Exactly, like she was trying to explain to him. When they were in there together, I thought they both flown in. And so I was thinking, yeah, like take some people out, you know, save who you can. And she was like, yeah, go under and push it up, like you see Supergirl doing on the TV show, or you've seen Superman do before. And he was like, no, you know, I have to calculate thrust, and I might just go through the fuselage and all that kind of bullshit. So yeah, anyway, a bit of a mix. We agree on a lot of things, so it's good to have a bit of thing that we've kind of got a bit of a difference of opinion on.
And well, I think we both kind of acknowledge the same weaknesses in the show. We just are looking for different things, and so it appeals a bit more to you than it does to me.
I think so. Okay, so let's talk about episode 9 of Swamp Thing.
I think it's very evident that this is a truncated season. The pacing this season has just been kind of wonky all over the place. And I think last week I was talking about how episode 8 didn't feel like we were coming up on the penultimate episode of the season. Whereas I think episode 9 sort of filled that brief of being the penultimate episode, but it definitely feels like there was stuff that was supposed to happen between 8 and 9 that we just didn't see.
Let's talk about some of the plot points. What did you make of these scenes where Woodrow is cutting up Alec in like a surgeon horror film kind of way? Obviously we're kind of robbed of something because he's a plant and there's no blood and actual organs being cut out, but
even still, I found it like quite difficult to watch.
Yeah.
I mean, Swamp Thing is alive through the whole thing, and he's like screaming and pleading, and the Dr. Woodrow is just basically hacking at him with the scalpel.
I mean, very crudely, you know, his hands were going in there, you know,
he's
just
like
chopping,
pulling stuff out.
You know, I was expecting him to bring out like garden shears at one point because it's just, you know, he said he couldn't find any nerve endings to speak of, but yet Alec was in so much pain. Yeah, quite a strong moment. The most horror we've had probably in 4 episodes, I would say.
Definitely, yeah. And I think Woodrow really sort of encapsulates the idea of the mad scientist. I mean, he's a little bit just too fixated on the science and not so much on the effects of what he's trying to research.
Yeah, again, it's another overused kind of comic booky trope, the scientist trying to save the wife from some kind. I'm not even entirely sure what Victor Freeze's wife is suffering from, but it feels like it's on a level of Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, something like that.
I feel like we need to have a whole run of like superhero films and TV shows where the wives are the heroes and shitty things are happening to the husbands.
That TV show could have been the girls instead of the boys,
and
maybe just flip it around. Do you have any comment on the Blue Devil?
I find it interesting that they've introduced the Blue Devil at this stage. I think like somebody mentioned to me that he thought that Swamp Thing was really just meant to be a one and done kind of intro to Justice League Dark, and this sort of introduction of the Blue Devil in episode 9 of a 10 episode series sort of feels like that might be true.
If you're cutting the season down from 13 to 10, and if you're cutting the season down from potentially more to 1, I don't see the logic, really.
I guess they sort of needed him to come in and save Abby and Liz, but they probably could have come up with a more creative way to do it. Again, I think it's another indication that the season did not go as originally planned, and they've moved things around and messed things up, because I think it's really dumb to introduce a brand new character like this so late in the season.
I would agree with that entirely.
Particularly so late in a season that's not going to have a season 2. If we knew we were having a season 2, it would be a totally different story. It'd be like, okay, yeah, you know, give us a little glimpse of the Blue Devil now. We can go more into his backstory, his character origins and motivations in the next season. Would be kind of like a nice little teaser to get us to come back. But considering that we have essentially 1 episode left of this series, it's really not a good idea.
The show's it's kind of petering out, I would say. There's not a great deal that makes me want to, oh wow, can't wait for the season finale of this show. Another horror element that we had this week was Maria being put in an asylum, which is a fan favourite. Everyone likes an asylum.
Yeah.
And the kind of
mad woman in the attic sort of thing.
Yeah, he kind of gaslighted her. She's now in the asylum, and I'm not entirely sure what he's going to be up to next week. Potentially being killed by Alec Holland or something. What is going to happen next week? It's such a kind of everything is in the air.
Yeah, I honestly have no idea. I mean, normally at this point, in a show, I can sort of theorize like, oh, they're going to do this or this or this. This needs to happen for it to be properly resolved. With this show, I have absolutely no idea. And I'm not saying that in a good way.
No,
like,
I know, don't worry. I think we all got it.
Yeah, because sometimes it can be kind of nice to, you know, have a show where you don't know exactly what's going to happen next because they've just structured it that well. With this, it's that, you know, everything is up in the air because nothing's really connected to each other.
Let me ask you a question. Did a villain emerge in this season?
Not really.
No.
I mean, we sort of have a villain in Avery, but and again, I was discussing this with somebody else. He's such a caricature of a character, and particularly of a southern character, which is just done so many times. And as a southerner, when all you see are these ridiculous caricatures of southern culture, you just kind of want to kill the people who write them. And because Avery could have been a diabolical villain, but he's portrayed as this sort of bumbling country bumpkin, sponging off his wife, good old boy. And how many villains do we need like that, really?
He's being put forward as the villain, and we assume next week Swamp Thing's probably going to kill Woodrow, probably going to kill Avery, and that's it. And it's going to feel very kind of anticlimactic. I mean, when you think about Swamp Thing, the entity, and when you think of what he looks like and the kind of effects that the show has given him, the budget that the show has given him, it's a very mediocre kind of way for the season to end. We found out that Alec Holland's body in the swamp this week. So somehow his memories have been mapped onto Swamp Thing, but it's not actually Alec.
Yeah, I think Woodrow said that Alex's body was basically blown up, although the skeleton that we see at the end is incredibly intact for spending several weeks in a swamp. Somehow Alec's particles mingled with the mutagen and created this plant that thinks it's a man and is imbued with Alec's memories. And I'm like, okay.
And that's going to kill a scientist and a kind of entrepreneur next week, and that's your season, folks.
Yeah.
There won't be a season 2.
Is there a way that this show could end that would be satisfactory to you?
I would imagine not. They would need to introduce an 11th hour element to this that would completely seem ridiculous, but would be a worthy finale. And I don't know what that element is, because nothing we've been shown, any assortment of what we've already been shown, will seem like a good final episode face-off for Swamp Thing, if that makes sense.
We do talk about it quite a bit, particularly with like the super characters having villains that actually match their capabilities, so that the hero doesn't have to be handicapped in some ways. Like,
Supergirl's the biggest.
Yeah, I was thinking Supergirl. Yeah, they're always doing something to Supergirl to like limit her powers and limit her influence, because she's going up against these villains that aren't really at her level. I mean, you do have that in Swamp Thing. Like, how is Avery going to stand up against Swamp Thing? Like, I mean, he can have his organs ripped out and he just regenerates immediately. Like, he can control plants and bring them from all over the place. How is just a regular man going to go up against that?
I'll return the question to you. Is there any way you think we could have a finale next week that will in any way make you think, God, I wish there was going to be a season 2 of this show?
No. I mean, not at this stage. I think it's totally possible that they could have done a 10-episode one-shot season of Swamp Thing that was satisfying and interesting and really drew you in.
It must be incredibly frustrating as a creative to have established a world, because the payoff is going to be in season 2.
Yeah.
You're building, and then no season 2, and so it all looks like
you didn't know
poor
what you were
pacing.
doing. Yeah, I imagine that it's incredibly frustrating for everybody involved in this project to see what it has become, because I mean, it started out so promising. The first 2 or 3 episodes were like really strong, really good, and then it's the changes started to become apparent, and the pacing felt very off, and that problem has only been exacerbated the closer we get to the end of the season. Right now, I can't think of a satisfying ending for the series. I think it probably needed to have the 13 episodes in there, probably needed to have at least a season 2. It was obviously planned to have a season 2 with what they've given us so far in the characterization they've given us so far. And it needed a villain that Swamp Thing could really go all out against, and we don't have any of that. So I think next week's episode is probably going to be a bit of a letdown.
Has there been a lack of conflict in this season, would you say?
Oh, definitely. There's been very, very minimal conflict whatsoever. There was initially in the first few episodes, the idea of this mutagen being dumped in the swamp and people dumping things in the swamp, but then that was kind of brushed aside very quickly. There's sort of a passive conflict between Abby and Woodrow, except she isn't aware of the conflict, only he's aware of the conflict. There's like little kind of many personal skirmishes between characters like Lucilia and Avery and his wife, Maria and Abby, just kind of like little conflicts. But there hasn't really been a feeling of something integral at stake, basically. Nothing's been at risk here. It feels unfulfilled.
What do you make of the green people and the fact that they were dropped like a bad habit? kind of about mid-season. I mean, they could have been something. They could have been the
They could have
finale,
been
couldn't
something,
they?
yeah.
Him against like a kind of army of those would have been something to watch on TV.
I think if they'd kept the green sickness throughout the whole season, then it would have been a stronger presentation overall. If that had been the main conflict, Abby and Alec trying to figure out how to cure these people.
Because the CDC left like mid-season as well.
Yeah, they were just gone.
Yeah.
And we didn't even get to really see them leave. It was just one episode. They were like, "Oh yeah, the CDC's left already." It was like, okay, when did that happen? But yeah, the cure for that disease just happened entirely too quickly and was resolved way too fast and too easily. Again, like the dumping in the swamp, it was something that was just sort of brushed aside and forgotten. You know, that little girl who had the weird connection with Swamp Thing, she was again brushed aside and forgotten. And there were a lot of these little threads that they could have picked up and made into something really interesting, and they just dropped the ball over and over and over again.
I'm not really looking forward to the season finale, but I'm looking forward to the season finale being over. I've never felt more conflicting opinions during a season of TV than I have probably during this. I remember at the beginning thinking this could be so special.
I know, I remember our first reviews, we were just like gushing about it all over the place, and the past few weeks we've just kind of been like, what the fuck is going on with this show? It's really frustrating as a viewer and a fan to see a really good concept be kind of abused so much and just not utilized.
So I think that's all the time we've got this week. Thanks very much for listening. We can be found on Patreon, patreon.com/geeknerd. We can be found on Facebook, facebook.com/thegeekly.
We're also on Twitter at geeknerdpod, and we have a pretty new website at geeknerdpod.com.
It's really nice, so please go and have a look. We're going to be putting lots of information about other projects we're going to be doing in the future on there as well, and that'll probably be the best place to find everything.
And we've also got some various giveaways and promotional things happening, which will also be on our website. So yeah, definitely hit us up for any sort of news about what's going on with the Geekly and Geek Nerd podcasts.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this on iTunes, why not subscribe? It'll mean that every time a new episode comes out, ping,
downloaded straight to your device. You never have to worry about missing us.
Absolutely. And thank you to our new listeners this week in Peru and France.
Yay!
Peru.
We've hit 6 continents so far, so now we just need some scientists in Antarctica to like listen to the podcast, and we will have hit all 7 continents. It's amazing.
Freaking Peru! If you'd have told me we're gonna hit Peru, crazy. Thanks so much for listening, and see you next week.
See ya.